Good morning. Yes, morning. Not 8 o'clock on
Morning.
Thursday. It's Saturday, 10 a.m., 10:01, because we never start on time. So this is difficult discussions, and I am excited today. We have a new guest, and I am going to get the pleasantries out of the way. I'm Johnny, and I will be the moderator today. So I'm not really going to be talking too much. Feeling great. I'm recovering quite well from COVID, back to my normal bullish self. And I will lead the floor over to our guest. I'm going to start with our new guest. Introduce yourself.
I'm Eric Hicks, and I actually am a longtime friend of Vernon, great friend of mine since elementary school. So it's just glad to be amongst friends at the end of the day. We're here to, it sounds like a very interesting, fascinating, challenging discussion to really just learn about each other, and I'm excited for that. And then also, I think a bonus for me, Johnny, I don't know if you remember, but I think we went to middle school together. You went to
Correct.
Thompson, right? Well, bingo. So amongst even more, long time schoolmates, friends, it's just great to be able to know that we came from similar upbringings, and then to kind of see it full circle 20, 30 years later. Everybody still looks really good. And then it's also nice to meet new friends. I believe Cecilia is your name.
I'm Stacy.
I'm sorry,
You
Stacy.
was almost there.
I'm great with faces, bad with names. I don't know why.
This one?
But thank you for having me.
They need to count.
Stacy, introduce yourself to the
Very
viewers.
quiet.
I am Stacy Deering, aka Professor D, your favorite local professor in the Metro Detroit area, specializing in urban politics at your service.
Excellent. Daddy duty.
And
Introduce yourself.
yeah, if you all don't notice, we got a
Daddy
little,
duty.
we got, they're usually in bed, but we got Vivian down here. She's hanging out, even though she was supposed to stay upstairs. No, Vernon, educator. Um, I like having these discussions because it's not just about having thought-provoking conversations with like-minded people so that you can have confirmation bias. My history as a former statistics teacher, as a administrator and public employee, bring all those to the table just to add something that people can be mindful of, and we can bounce some ideas, talk about some things, talk about some topics that people like to post on Facebook, and sit behind the keyboard and keypads of Facebook, but bringing those conversations for the last few months to actual dialogue.
Excellent.
So I'm enjoying that.
Now,
And I got my coffee. No whiskey this today. Coffee. Woo.
with good old H2O.
Me too, me too.
Now, the way we
It's
normally
water.
do this when I have new guests is I give them the floor for the particular topic that we're going to tackle. So, Eric, I would like to hear from you what you would like to talk about today.
Yes, I would like to talk about actual fact checking and source material.
All right, now
Like
this sounds
that.
interesting.
Like that.
I think where you're going with that is the actual implication of where information is derived from and how we interpret it based on our own bias. Am I on the same page with you?
Yes.
There we go. Media bias. We've been wanting that one. Kind of, haven't we?
All right. Now, well, this sounds like we might hit a different avenue with it,
Yeah.
particularly this time. So I am interested, and it does sound like it's going to be something that's difficult for some people, but we'll see. So let's start with you, Eric, in terms of your feelings on where we get our information and how that information is perceived by people who, let's say, may not agree with the information being provided.
Sure. So very interesting topic. So when I think of source material, there's a lot of ways you can go with it, but I wanted to start with, let's just use an example, and we can start with the election. We can start with politics, not to speak on my opinion of who I feel should have won and all that good stuff, just strictly on how we determine what information we can rely on based on the sources that we use. So setting the framework of maybe two approaches that seem to always come to the forefront, and that is kind of conservative media sources versus maybe left-leaning media sources. And that usually seems to be the conflict, because one group says, well, that we can't trust that source, and the other side says we can't trust that source. So how do you disseminate the facts through all that when you have two sides? So I'm setting the framework here. If you look at, for example, if you were to go to ABC.com, CBS.com, CNN.com, ABC.com, and even Fox.com, if you click on election 2020, you will see headlines that say President-elect Joe Biden. On the other hand, if you go to OAN, you go to Epoch Times, those will be, so the first four or five that I mentioned are considered mainstream media. Now, on the other hand, the OWN, OAN.com, or EpochTimes.com, you're going to get a different perspective. And it'll say contested election if you click on election 2020, meaning that both sides are looking at it totally different. So if you have a conservative side, they're going to say, well, we see a contested election. It's not over. If you if you trust the mainstream media news, well, the president-elect is just waiting for January 6th, the confirmation, and everything's set in order. So, no, it's not to say that any side in this mode is wrong or right. It's to say that we just have different views and we have different sources.
Can I ask a kind of question with that? Like, during the election, so what I try, and we talked about this for the last couple of weeks, actually on November 3rd, November 4th, November 8th, you know, pretty much the big day, I found myself, I didn't want to watch CNN. Because, I mean, I appreciate Van Jones. Like, I think Van Jones and I are like-minded, like-experienced people. So if I'm going to go to get somebody that I want a political perspective from, I'm gonna go with somebody I think I relate to. I don't really relate to Tucker Carlson. Like my upbringing, my racial background, my educational background, like I don't align with Tucker Carlson. But I found myself trying to watch One American News, that's the OWN, you know, like, because I didn't know that it was on, like, my main cable, which would make it mainstream media, because it's available on DirecTV. Like, so no matter how we try and scope it, if I have access to it, it's mainstream media. But my question is really not the element of it being mainstream media from popularity, but do you feel that OWN is delivering or titling things based on their demographic that they are trying to reach and the feelings that the demographic have? So if your ratings come from a certain group, why would I not cater to using dialogue from that certain group?
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand your point, and that is, of course, a group, a news outlet is going to cater their information to the group for ratings, I think is what you're
Right.
saying. Yeah.
Yes. So
And
so I'm not questioning I'm not questioning their statement, but like you said, with them not referring to Joe Biden as president-elect, they're doing that because they want to keep people clicking on their website. They want to keep people watching their channel, and they're relatively newer. They want to promote their channel more. Like, with all due respect, they're not just trying to be investigative and work hard. No, they're like a charter school, in my opinion. Like, they're trying to get the population to come to them, and they're trying to do that by means of connection.
So
yeah, and yeah, I mean, hey, let's be honest. I think that we live in a society that is based upon, the almighty dollar. So I wouldn't disagree with that. I think the issue is that, yeah, if you go to the mainstream media side, there's no doubt in my mind that the ratings have suffered because there are people that normally watch mainstream media, and they're disillusioned because they don't believe that the truth is being spoken on the mainstream media side, and yet they continue to stay on air. Because if you look at CNN, if you look at Fox, the ratings plummeted, and it's because, like you said, that you have one side that is contesting the election and the others maintain their position, and you have many people that don't agree who normally watched those stations and they believed in the truth. So I think the other question you would want to ask is, how are ratings based, almighty dollar based companies able to continue to stand, yet their ratings have dropped? And I think you have to look at their backers, because the backers, as you can see in our society, our companies are becoming conglomerates. So there used to be a lot of checks and balances where you have, if one person doesn't agree with maybe someone's service, you go down the street to the other barber who cuts better. But if all the barbers are employed by one person, and that barber says, you're going to cut this way, and I don't care what anybody says, then yeah, you're going to have the chance of people losing people, because not everybody wants to be cut the same way. So it's the same thing with mainstream media. If everybody is saying the same thing, you have enough people that disagree, your ratings plummet. Well, why are these companies still standing? It's because they're being backed by someone that has potentially an agenda that no matter what is said, they're going to still say what they're going to say. And it's simply because, and it's not to say one group is wrong or right. I'm just setting the framework of the current economic system that we're under.
Well, like,
Epoch Times does need, well, I was just going to say, Epoch Times, you're right. You're absolutely right. Epoch Times runs off of people who believe in what they say, or they believe in their news that makes sense. It's fair, balanced, it's reliable, it's trustworthy. That's kind of what we do with anything, an iPhone, an iPad. You buy things when it's good.
Yep. But so, like, for me, so we've had several discussions when it comes to media bias, and there are matrices that break down what media bias is. So it doesn't matter if you want to go far left or you want to go far right. That's still media bias. So just because your opinion is far right doesn't mean that, and you keep saying whether it's right or wrong. If president-elect is a normalized term after an election, after processes have happened, after votes have been confirmed by secretaries of state, that has nothing to do with the media. That is a term being used. It's just like if a quarterback is not under center, there are two terms. You could call it a shotgun, you could call it a pistol. Both were created by Johnny's friends that play football. They just wanted to incorporate the Second Amendment into football. You know, we got shotgun, we got pistol. You don't have machine gun. And if Barstool Oakland University wants to call it the machine gun, but ESPN and everybody else says they're in shotgun, that's not bias. That's the standard for how you report something. But then when I'm looking at, and like I said, for people out there, when we have these discussions in our discussion group to try and find content for the week, one thing we talk about with the bias is I'm not really talking about Fox. I'm not talking about cable news. And the reason I say cable news is not your local news where you're reporting numbers and things like that. They're giving opinions. If you watch like this year was interesting with the presidential news coverage. I got so sick of people touching screens just to blow up an image to show a county and then shrink it. So like, hey, if I touched it, boom, boom. And you can see Maricopa County. I've never heard Maricopa County so many times in my life. Maricopa County. Look at Maricopa County. Look at the numbers in Maricopa County. Oh, we just got Maricopa County in. Well, they're reporting numbers. So there's no kind of bias there other than here are where the numbers are. When you go to the opinion portions, when you get to your Sean Hannity's, when you get to your Tucker Carlson's, your Van Jones's, that's someone's opinion. But what I think is more detrimental with media bias and kind of the spirit of how difficult discussions started is what people decide to share and include as information, especially on social media. So there is a nice set standard of what unbiased, right down the middle, highly factual content where you can get it from. So if somebody is giving me something from the National Enquirer, there is no way that you're going to tell me that I need to take that with more value or equal value as something that's reported from NPR.
Where do you get that from? Where do you get the National Enquirer has less value?
I'm sorry?
Where do you get that? You said you would not trust the National Enquirer as a legitimate source, is what you're saying, or no?
I'll say this. The National Enquirer can give factual information, but NPR over decades has reported more consistently, more factually than the National Enquirer. So the National Enquirer's history is why I would not hold them as high of value. Not saying that they're just lying, but I would not hold what they're posting as high of value as NPR or The Hill or anything from the AP. And part of that is like coming from educational background of how you're able to cite sources. Now, I always tell students, this is when it first started to blow up. When kids want to lie and not have supporting evidence, they say, I heard from someone. They're never specific. When kids want to tell a fib or they want to say, but somebody told me, they never cite who it was. So I can't take what they're saying as valuable. But if they said, hey, Mr. Burden sent an email yesterday that said this, now I know that I have a direct pathway to a source. And if it's about math homework, that's probably credible. But if Mr. Burden said that the Miss Hicks's social studies homework isn't due tomorrow, what credibility is that? I'm still a teacher. I still assign homework, but it's something completely out of my scope. So National Enquirer has a history of sensationalized entertainment news. Therefore, I'm not going to go to them for the credible news. Like I said in the chat to Kobe, when Kobe Bryant passed away, the first organization, media outlet to release the information about Kobe Bryant dying was TMZ. I can still remember it like it was yesterday. How many people did not believe it really until ESPN reported it, until NBC reported it, until Fox Sports reported it. Once those entities reported it, once it was spoken of at the Pro Bowl, then all of a sudden it said, okay, it's confirmed. It's something real. TMZ was right. But because of their history of being sensationalized gossip media, their credibility for factual evidence has to be put into question. That's why it's not about one source, it's about multiple sources. So when someone says, hey, can you cite your source? And it comes from Joe Patriot in the Appalachians. Okay, Joe Patriot in the Appalachians. We understand you have an opinion, and that's what's driving how you're reporting this. So can I hear from John Smith in New York? Can I also hear from, Jesse Smith in Wyoming? But I also need to hear from Joseph in LA. Because now if we get the same story from all of those different backgrounds, and that's what a lot of this right down the middle publications are, then we can say, all right, this is about as close to the truth without any slant, without any bias as possible.
So basically what you're saying is you base your reliability on a source on precedence.
Credibility. So Eric, I got a math degree.
Is that
I can talk about differential equations.
No, I'm just saying.
You don't want to learn from my daughter Vivian about differential equations. She does math.
I'm just asking the question.
No,
So basically, you rely on precedents whether something is trustworthy or not. I'm just asking.
Yes, like your.
That's essentially what you said. It's okay to say yes. I'm just curious. I just wanted to know.
I checked someone's credentials.
Thank you. All right, that's cool. We're just learning.
Yeah.
So
I think credentialed people should be like, credentialed. Like
I'm not. That's fine.
Right.
I agree. I agree with that. Oh, go ahead.
All right, excellent. Because like that's one thing I'm kind of concerned with my technical side of this is like I think if I'm mute for too long or if I'm just sitting idle, that's when I lose my audio, which has happened a couple times in the past. So I do want to just throw in some stuff here and there, just hopefully not have that happen. But I do have a question in relation to what you guys are talking about. Now,
before you ask the question,
okay.
Can I tell people what OWN is? Because we talked about OWN for like 10 minutes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So OWN is One American News Network. Okay, it was established in 2004 to be an independent media outlet where they're not taking left or right side to actually give information down the middle. And they have been coming up, rising with their ratings and giving more news. I just wanted to throw that out there for people who are watching.
Excellent.
For the uninitiated. I like that.
My question,
but I like that. Go, John.
Yeah. Now, Vernon, you brought up like credentials, and Eric, you brought up essentially like different leaning news sources that may provide different information. Now, my question is, when we talk about different perspectives in terms of how news is reported, we also have to look at the accountability side of it, because as you said, it is a business, and that may influence the way information is provided. If I have a particular customer base, I am going to cater to that customer base. That means my information may be skewed more to support that base. Now, when we look at the credential side of it, the guy from Appalachia, maybe he doesn't have as wide a scope or credential. However, he may have his thumb on the pulse of information that others in, say, LA, New York, may not have. So if we have a situation where someone does have information that may not be widely available, take TMZ, for example. They were immediately out there, hey, Kobe Bryant just died in a helicopter crash. Nobody else knew it yet, so it wasn't confirmed. But at that time, they had their thumb on the pulse. Yet, as you said, we tend to not always believe them because of their history. So if we don't have a situation, especially when we're talking about, election potential fraud and things of that nature, that's not necessarily information that's going to be thrown to the forefront for people to disseminate. So if someone has their thumb on that pulse and has information relating to that, that information may be something that you do not agree with. So now your perspective is, I don't believe this information because it's not what I want to believe. And they may not be providing enough foundation for me to hold it true. So how do you get over that hurdle where, say, if I turn on OWN and OWN has a report from someone who said something and it may be true, yet it hasn't been corroborated by the outside sources that don't agree, would not have that information because maybe they're not looking for it. How do we as a community take all of the information we're getting and get to a resolution where we can see through the subterfuge to understand what is actually happening? Because I don't necessarily want to discount someone saying, 4,000 ballots got dropped off yesterday. Someone in LA may not have information to confirm that if it happened in Georgia. So if it happened in Georgia and someone from Georgia is saying it happened, what would they need to do for someone who does not agree with what they're hearing to be able to make that person believe what is being told? Like, how do we process that information to start to believe when we don't have national confirmation?
I think that's an excellent question, Johnny, and it goes back to my point. You have two sides. You have Stacey made the point that OWN says that they're independent, that they are not right or left. You have to use, unfortunately, you have to, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. I believe that, the Bible says God gives us discernment because you have two conflicting sides. So if you have two conflicting, think about it. Let's go to the original fact checker. Is anybody, we can do a little, if, this is my opinion, but anybody have an idea of who the original fact checker is?
I don't understand
in time, in history. You go based on one of my sources, I would say that Satan is the original fact checker. If you go to the book of Genesis, chapter 3, 1-7, as Eve is meandering through the garden, la la la, life is so wonderful. Satan comes up to her and says, what's going on? Check out this apple here and try it. And she says, well, God says we can't, or our eyes will be open, and God told us not to do this. And Satan says, if you do it, your eyes will be open. That's not true with God saying. He said you'll be like gods, just like God. He doesn't want you to see that. So that was the original fact checker, was Satan. And I'm not saying it from I'm just saying you have to check the fact checkers is only my point. And it's not to say that anyone is right or wrong, but your discernment has to come in because, yeah, you have one person making a statement and then someone saying, that's not necessarily true. Well, how do you know that? How do I know that what you're saying is true based on your accusation against the person who made the initial statement? And unfortunately, it comes down to where do you base your value system? Because people believe anything they want. You don't know what their source is. Like you said, their agenda. We talked about how OWN says they're independent, but then they have
they're absolutely not.
backers
Like, we
financially
don't need
in
to
terms of
discuss.
their, in terms of, financial, they want to make money at the end of the day. You're absolutely right. Well, on the other hand, mainstream media,
They are
yes,
mainstream.
their ratings might go down, but we have the issue that now they're controlled by one controlling interest who may have interests in other areas. They have money in one area, but they can buy up a parent company that owns these other companies and projects their agenda through that media. So I'm not saying one side is right or the other. I'm saying you have to use your own discernment and say, this is what's true, this isn't. There's a lot of mess going on out there. So
But you have to have.
it's nice to have, it's at least, and I'm gonna just end it on this. It's nice to have the little engine that could, or the group that challenges the other five. You have to have that. If everybody's always saying the same thing, how do you know when they're actually not accurate, or they have an agenda? You need accountability. That's the beauty of America, is that 10 people can say one thing, and there's always that one person that has that other voice, and you're not going to be persecuted for it. That's excellent.
But I'll say, no, this is what makes America, is no matter who that one person is, no matter that person's value, if 10 people have an opinion and they all come together, those 10 people's voices combined are greater than that one. That's what.
That doesn't make them right, though.
But that's democracy. That's
I'm just saying, because if you look at Jesus,
to take away from monarchy is you have democracy. You have the voice of the people, not the voice of the individual. So nobody says that they're wrong. Nobody says that you can't have that opinion. But for the greater good of all, you go with the majority. But I want to kind of touch back on a couple of things. And this is.
hey, by the way, sorry if you guys hear some. I don't know. I have vacuuming going on in my apartment complex. I hope you guys can't hear that.
I got a future or soon to be 4 and 5 year old upstairs doing something. I have no idea what they're doing.
Okay.
As long as I don't hear anything break, I'm good. But no, so a couple of things, and this did kind of change my scope. And it's not about calling somebody wrong, but like I want to touch. OWN is mainstream media, and OWN, as they originated, is completely far right now. And part of that being far right is they started to get support from the president, so that sensationalized their reporting even more. So that's where bias comes from. So if we actually talk about what media bias is for, like, what you're actually saying is right. What they feel like they want to report and what they feel will get the most connection to the largest group of people is what they report. I know on Facebook it happens all the time. Everybody talks about George Floyd and how horrible it was what happened to George Floyd, but then you don't see that type of national media converge on when a law enforcement officer is killed in the line of duty, and they don't get the same hashtags and things like that. That's where media bias would kind of come, where, all right, we can report this, but there's not really a story here. So I'm going to choose my stories based upon what's going to have the population watch me the most. So that's, yes, media bias exists from that standpoint. They can't tell lies. That's where I don't agree. There is a standard. You cannot tell a lie. You cannot put out false, erroneous information. You can decide what information you put out, but you can't put out 100% wrong information. That's why even for these independent entities, that's why they have to touch very close upon saying things like, oh, there might have been fraud, or fraud needs to be looked into. They can't say Joe Biden did X, Y, and Z in order to win the election. They don't even touch upon saying the actual, like, Democratic Party. They'll say liberals or the left extremists, because they can't actually tell or deliver false information. But one thing we did at school I work at now at Lake Orion about 2 years ago, we had a company come in, and it's big for this company to help out students with this. It's called MediaWise. And MediaWise educates kids on how to receive information and how to, it's not about fact checker. I think a lot of people don't like fact checkers because they post something and there's something that says like, hey, this is kind of disputed. Hey, this is not supported by any other information. So no, if somebody is sitting there saying that football is played with 4 guys on the field and the rest of the world says, no, it's 11, that person can have their opinion, and opinions can be wrong because those opinions aren't supported by rules and things and policies and things like that. So MediaWise will tell people, or it works with high schools and students on, all right, first off, when you see something, be mindful if it is great information that confirms your bias, not media bias, your bias. If you see something pop up that you say, see, boom, told you, I'm right. So I'll go back to, and everybody should know this by now, I'm a huge Michigan fan. Ohio State versus Michigan football game, 2016. JT Barrett is short. You wound up seeing doctored images that either supported that he was short compared to doctored images that showed that he got the first down. Because you have an Ohio State fan base, you have a Michigan fan base. As soon as I see the picture of him being short with the yellow line right down the middle, I'm like, see, I knew he was short. And look at this picture. It confirmed my bias right away. And then my roommates from college, Ohio State fans, showed another picture. And they said, look at that. He is clearly over the line. And I'm like, man, look at this Photoshop picture that you're talking about. The lines don't match up. The player's body, like his arm is extended longer. Because in the world of technology, you have so many different ways to skew images, reports, things like that. I've done it like 3 times just to mess with conservative friends. I've created a meme. And once I've seen like 6 people share it, I laughed because I said, all I did was went to my cell phone, went to meme generator, created a meme, added some nonsense information, and it said, yup, see, because it was going to confirm their bias. And that's where I think people have to look at things. And I'm not trying to call, you posted something about what
Yeah,
is the
because
German.
I don't think we're in disagreement about the doctoring, and that's exactly my
But
point.
CNN doesn't
You
document
have to have.
That's where I
Well,
disagree.
you said what?
Like CNN has to hold a standard, so I don't think CNN doctors.
Well, you can doctor the truth, and here, so you brought up CNN. We can talk about that. So I wouldn't. I mean, if I do enough research, I'm sure I can find something in mainstream media, well, specifically CNN, where they doctored a story. In other words, they embellished, they sensationalized, they added, they took away. Media companies do that all the time, and it's well documented. Right?
Well, that's different. That's the delivery method.
No,
that's not.
That's bias based on wanting something to be true. So, for example, here I'll just give you a very specific one.
Yeah.
Dan Rather reported on, I think, George Bush years ago about his alleged decorated career, and he said, "I've got this documentation, and it's proof that George Bush was never in the military." And then they verified that his source was wrong, and it was a doctored document, completely wrong. And Dan Rather was reprimanded. I think he even left his news post. I mean, it was a huge story.
But that's what I'm
saying. This was mainstream media with bias.
But there's a consequence to being wrong. I agree with that.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just establishing that mainstream media has a reputation, and despite their reputation, they are willing to sensationalize, change, doctor, just as others. but they just like in movies, you see it all the time. Where the big evil company says, "Oh, we got a problem. We got to push this under the rug. Johnson, I need you to come clean it up." That's what big companies are known for. So that's fine. That's just the reality that we live in. So that's why I was saying it's always good to have the little engine that could. The only problem is, what happens with the little engine that could? They become the big engine. You made a really great point. Trump put OWN on the map. So you're right. Now they're facing with more subscribers, more listeners. So now they have the challenge of making sure that they stay truthful. They keep that reputation going. Or they can also become a group that's so big and then they're bought out by somebody who could care less what happens to the ratings because they're going to be blanketed by money either way. That's
I need to add some
the unfortunate
context to this
society
real
that we
quick.
live in.
Yeah. All right, Stace.
Yeah.
So just giving a background, and this is if you ever study like public policy or policy operations, we have something called narrative framing that media specializes in. It almost makes them the fourth indivisible leg of government. So what that means is they can take facts, data, and they can frame it in a way that is specific to their audience and give you sensationalism to make you tune in and to boost their ratings. And that's across the board. That's from writing news articles to journalists reporting to having specialized shows that come on. So narrative framing creates media bias inherently. And then all of us individually, we have implicit biases, right? So those are like our blind spots that we can't see,
Right.
but you need an accountability partner to help pull that out.
Absolutely.
So when we have these type of discussions, we're seeing each other's blinders, but that doesn't just happen on the individual level, that happens collectively. And that's what you see in media outlets. So when you go into the sources and the credibility and you're fact checking the fact checker or you're fact checking your sources, what you have to do is keep bumping into the same data. So if you hit 10 different sources and you keep coming out with the same outlook, you can look at the credibility ranking of that and see how significant that data or that information is.
That's fair.
Right. So the like little engine that could concept, like that's not how scientific experiments work. Like you don't do one trial. You have to have a control. You have to have a independent variable. You have to have deep in the variable. That's the way the scientific method isn't just for doing experiments, is how you go into and the framework of how you go into learning. Really, it's how you take deductive reasoning in mathematics. Like I taught geometry. One major concept in geometry is proofs. You can get to the same location many different ways, but you have to bring and support what allows you to do that. You have to use theorems and postulates and definitions that allow you to make a statement, because you can make conjecture, but as long as there is one counterexample that completely proves it false, then you can't eventually get to this, calling it the truth. So it's what people take value at. But one of the things about like bias and the like little engine that could, these companies didn't get big. It's kind of like Vegas. Vegas doesn't have all those hotels because they lose money. Like as much as people think they go to Vegas and they won, Vegas isn't existing because they lose money. These mainstream media aren't the way they are because they are putting out erroneous information. That it, like Stacy is saying, it may be framed completely different. And we noticed that, and we've talked about it before, when Botham Jean is killed in his apartment by an off-duty police officer, some media outlets report, because they were giving it facts from police, that he had marijuana in the house. That has nothing to do with why he was killed, but it's a report to be put out there so that it softens the blow to people that otherwise would also be in disagreement with what happened, and seeing the racial overtone. It's creating kind of like, well, he wasn't that great of a guy. You know, that's where media bias does come into play. But especially when it comes to certain things, our discernment of what is relevant, not truth or fiction, what is relevant information is also a part of how we do things. But I wanted to get back. I saw a post of yours that talked about how Hitler and the Nazis took over Germany, but no, it gave
Hey, I mean, I'm cool. I love that you saw it because I mean, it's great that.
But no, it was like all types of false.
People are.
It was all type of false. I don't care where the source is. It's all type of false. First off, like that's a perfect example. You posted it yourself of everything that it does to align with conservative bias. So one of the first statements was they took away their guns. That was the first statement. The only reason they even make that statement is to attract a Second Amendment enthusiast that believes that if you take away my guns, stop rubbing the beard. Stop rubbing the beard, Johnny. But that image was sculpted for you to post it so that it can attack every bias. And if you really look at it, everything that was said 100% is about conservative bias. No point in there was minorities mentioned in your post.
So here's the deal. I've researched.
It didn't mention minorities. It didn't mention.
Hold on.
It didn't mention like the purpose of the Holocaust.
Hold on, so listen.
Like,
so it's very well documented that one of the first things that the Nazi Party, the National Socialist Party, did was they made sure that the Jews willingly gave up their guns. That is definitely something they did.
Execute the opposition in the streets so that they could come to power. Just chronologically.
Hold on. But let's go bigger than that. First off, they spread propaganda. That's what, if you could have used that to support like media bias. First thing they did was spread propaganda to marginalize and minimalize and also create fear of Jewish people. That's not mentioned in what you posted.
So let's go back. Hold on. Let's stick to the guns part. That was the first thing you brought up. Let's stay focused on the guns. So you do agree that hold on.
So
you do agree. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. We're on the same page. So the Nazi Party, that one of their agenda items was to make sure that Jews did not have guns so that they could not fight back, which is why today the motto of Israel is never forget, and they are one of the most heavily armed countries and one of the smallest in the world. That's exactly
I have a serious question.
It was their direct response to them not having the ability to protect themselves during the Holocaust.
This is what you're saying. So because we have the Second Amendment. So what I'm just acknowledging. I'm just going off of the what I posted. Yeah.
So do you agree with that being true though? That is what they did.
Explain why. Eric, there is no Second Amendment that was in place circa 1933.
Don't disagree with that. Don't disagree with that. I'm talking about the article didn't say, it said that they will take away your guns because it's in reference to something that happened in the past. It's just, I mean, I can pull up I don't have it in front of me, but I can pull it up and see you're probably looking at it more so extrapolation. You can draw your own conclusion from it, but that they're just saying that's false. What happened in the past.
But no, it's false. So
yeah, I can pull up the article.
If you really break it down, first off, it's trying to draw a correlation from Nazi Germany.
Absolutely.
I read a book that I reference on the show all the time. It was amazing. It's called They Thought They Were Free. Germany, 1933 to 1945. Mm-hmm. It is a breakdown, and this book was written in the 60s. It is following 8 Germans throughout life, because it is a question that a lot of philosophers say, how did the Holocaust happen? Did 100% of Germans, non-Jewish Germans, and other parts of Europe, did they agree with the Nazi Party? Because how does this happen? And everything from your list. So this is, when we're talking about research, I'm talking about, this is one of the most dynamic and popularized accounts of being a citizen in Germany during that time of the rise of the Nazi Party.
Okay.
Not anywhere are those things that align with current conservative values as big reasons why this happens. So first off, when Hitler was in prison, he wrote a book. He found information to touch upon individuals' bias. So he touched upon the laborer and said, they're going to take away your job. Then he touched upon law enforcement and said, they are creating dangers for you in your job. So from this book written by a German, you could really break down how propaganda, fear-mongering, how organization, sensationalism, nationalism, you can really break down all of those things as obviously the rationale for how the Nazi Party took over Germany in the 1930s. But your post is only touching on our current situation as Americans. As Americans, we have the Second Amendment and have had the Second Amendment for over 220 years. Germany didn't have that. So being point number one, they took away their guns, that is false, because they didn't have the right the same way we do. But the only reason you post that is to touch upon the conservative idea that the Second Amendment, when that's taken away, Holocaust happens. Okay, secondly, it goes through and breaks down that the media did X, Y, and Z in your post.
Let me just quickly read.
But
Let
it
me
doesn't
just
touch
quickly.
upon the propaganda, which is, I'm talking, your mom taught history, like we've all went through history classes. There's not a history book that doesn't break down how the influence of propaganda coming from the Nazi Party, depictions of Jews taking money, depictions of Jews with all of the stereotypes, how that was put all throughout the streets of Nazi Germany. How burning synagogues started, and the acceptance of burning synagogues by creating an enemy, how that started the rise of the Nazi Party.
Let me just quickly read something. It says, the 1938 regulations against Jews' possession of weapons, which came into force the day after Kristallnacht, effectively deprived all Jews living under the Third Reich, this was the Nazis, within the occupied Sudetenland in Austria of the right to possess any form of weapons, including truncheons, knives, firearms, and ammunition. So
1938.
there was a deliberate. This was prior to
1938. I got
1938.
I'm not disagreeing. 1938, but this is the context that you're missing. When did Hitler and the Nazi Party take over, and when did the Holocaust start?
Well, I don't know the exact date, but it was far before. Well, as far it was.
No,
it was in the early. I believe it was in the early 1930s, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So
and then we know that the Holocaust took place sometime. You know, I mean, they had to develop enough power and influence to do that. And here's the thing that you're missing in this. So first,
that the
I don't. When I make posts, if you notice and you pointed this out, I don't usually make a lot of statements because. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We hear you, but
I hear you.
Chopping up.
Can you hear me?
Your Wi-Fi might be going in and out because it's kind of choppy.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
You coming in clearer now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stacey,
All
while
right.
he's bringing that statement, could you check the date? We're not.
I'm checking right now, actually.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Yep.
So what was I saying? The Nazis. Yeah, the Nazi. Can't even remember what I was trying to say specifically.
I think you were talking about the Nazis as far as the guns, and we were talking about when the Holocaust started. If that helps you get back on track.
Yeah, something about the Nazis. Oh, yeah. So I don't make. If you notice, I don't make statements generally because I don't. When I make my posts, because I want the person, when I share my post, I want you to draw your own conclusions. So, you're welcome to draw I'd love to have the discussion, but this is not for me to say, this exactly means that's what they're doing right now. But I see similarities, so I do post, but I don't make statements to try to steer anyone in any direction. Now, I will say this, and this is very important. There is video footage, and fact checker, please check it, Stacy. There's a video that shows Joe Biden next to Beto O'Rourke. He says in front of the crowd, Beto, you're going to be in charge of my agenda for guns in America. So Beto is proudly standing next to him. And Beto O'Rourke has made it very clear that he wants to take away our AR-15s. He wants to take away our firearms. You have to understand that our
Johnny's the
system,
expert on that.
and you have to understand, that the system that we have in place is designed to fight it. Vernon, yes, we are protected theoretically under the Second Amendment. However, there's skillful attempts to work around that. It's called death by 1,000 paper cuts. It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but in fact, certain items have been banned, even though the Second Amendment clearly states that our rights to bear arms shall not be infringed in any way. Yet, that is being violated every single day. So that was the point. But here's the thing. It still holds true because facts are facts.
I'm super Second Amendment. You got to remember, a lot of people reference the shall not be infringed part, but you also have to reference the well-regulated part. So, yes, they cannot just take from us in regards to the Second Amendment without provocation, but you have to have regulation. So you can have laws that are proven to make sense to regulate the Second Amendment, but you just can't say, well, we don't like this thing, so you can't have it. So there is a dichotomy there when it comes to the Second Amendment that even if you support it, you still have to take heart what the whole thing says. So I feel what you're saying, and I am a Second Amendment supporter, but we do have regulations, and under Trump, there have been many laws that have passed that are anti-Second Amendment in the regards of taking things away from gun supporters. Whether or not they have their own provocation, that's a discussion for another time. But that even happens under a Republican presidency. Whereas, under Obama, he did try to do those things, but he didn't have the support and backing to actually push a lot of that through. So in hindsight, it's kind of funny because you have a Democratic president who is anti-Second Amendment, who actually had more positive gun law pass under his presidency, to where you get the guy who's supported by the NRA, who is a Republican, who is banning bump stops, says that red flag laws are a good idea, which is the worst idea ever proposed in any law ever. It's, again, when you talk about the bias aspect, we are presented through the media that Donald Trump is a gun supporter. He's your guy. If you like guns, you should vote Donald Trump. But then when you look at the reality of what happens, that necessarily doesn't hold true. So, you almost triggered me with the whole Beto thing, because I don't like him. But at the same time,
I saw it.
Like, even if he gets to that position, he would have to have provocation to do the things he's doing, or he's going to be no different than how Donald Trump handled it. So it's tough when you get into that. So I'm sorry to go off on a tangent there, but I really wanted to tackle that as a Second Amendment supporter to give the whole scope to it. So go ahead, Vernon.
Yeah, no, but so my point isn't to nitpick the specifics about things. First, it still goes back to talking about media and bias. And Eric, you haven't heard about it. I've been proud every week about writing my research study for this course I'm taking. The course is called a Seminar in Curriculum. And I mean, my professor, Dr. Berg, he critiqued how we margin our references. Like APA, like he said, go buy your new APA standards book and document. Don't just go to some citation generator. No. You need to write your references. And I had to write an annotated bibliography. And my annotated bibliography was 13 pages itself. Like my sources, how they were going to influence my paper, and what information I derived from those sources to put into my research study. My research study had to be peer reviewed by my classmates. My research study technically still isn't done because upon that peer review, I need to make my revisions. So what that means is I gathered information from about 40 different places. I synthesized the information, so it is all my opinion. But when I synthesized it, I also had others with the same credentials as me review it. Not even the same opinion, but with the same credentials, review it. If it were to be published, my research study being published would say that I didn't make this up on my own, that here is where you can dig into where I made that statement from, that statement from, that statement from. And also others have read this and agree upon the information in there, even though it's my work, being factual. That is a very high standard, and I'm just some regular Joe Schmo educational leadership student in the doctoral program. I'm not somebody special. The media is held to that same standard, especially print media. Print media, if they post something wrong, they have to write a retraction. Now, if it is front page above the fold, but the retraction is on page 6C, they still had to write a retraction. The part that I disagree with is we post things and we don't want to drive the actual discussion and the context of it. And I even mentioned earlier, I have created memes just to see how people can be influenced by false information. We've talked about many things. Kyle Rittenhouse is a great example. And there was somebody that used to be in difficult discussions chat. He referred to Kyle Rittenhouse as a patriot. Outside of all of the things that are not law and order about Kyle Rittenhouse. But the first thing that happened with a lot of my conservative friends is, and I don't want to say it like this, you're not one of them, and I can't even go back, but I had like 4 conservative friends that I don't hold in high regard intellectually. They're great guys. They just aren't well studied. And the first thing they posted was pretty much an attack on all 3 victims of Kyle Rittenhouse's shooting. And this meme that they posted made them like career criminals and sexual predators. I said, first off, how do you get convicted of 8 sexual assaults and you're 24 years old and free? That's not even possible. But because it confirmed their bias that this young man was just trying to stop cities from burning, and these thugs who are also pedophiles, and notice, people throw out pedophilia a lot so that they can create a consistent enemy. Like, nobody thinks that's all right. Somebody that may have substance abuse issues, that's not as sexy to sway people away from someone as creating a pedophile. And when you put out erroneous information that does not hold the same standard of mainstream media or publications, then you are not putting out things with high fidelity. And I just think that, especially people in my circle, people I've grown up with, people I know that are educated, put out things with high fidelity that you would support. And people don't have to do what I do, but I actively never post memes. I disagree with so much about Trump as a leader. I never post anything that refers to him derogatory. I never post anything that is sensationalized against him. I never post anything that is demeaning of conservatives or the GOP or anything like that. Because first off, that diminishes my argument and my take. So if I'm going to post something, I don't share articles from CNN, NBC, NPR, anything like that. I'll synthesize context and I may post. But that's where I don't understand. If we post things, then your lack of a status, your lack of a comment on it supports 100% of it. It's not thought-provoking. You are saying that this is 100% factual. I don't even have to explain more.
That's fascinating that you bring that up, because my post, remember the other day when you said, hey, Eric, what's going on? You're not commenting on our little chat group.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of my posts that I post, I make no comment and I get lots of responses. So the fact is that even without context from my own bias or my own statements made, the post in itself creates the controversy, the discussion, the thought. There's a lot of thought-provoking. People like it like crazy because it is thought-provoking. So everything that you're saying, the results, the facts, again, I go based on facts. You know, I check the fact checkers, because you make really good statements and I get you in theory. False. In theory, they're great, but the facts show that people are. I make posts all the time. I get comments, like little messages to me. They know. Oh wow, man, great post, man. I get shares, hundreds of shares. So people are thinking. I mean, you may not think it's not thought provoking, but it's happening because it's just the facts. And I want to get back to. I want to get back to Johnny, your point about the Second Amendment, and I just want to challenge you as a fellow Second Amendment supporter. When you read that, it is very loosely stated. It's not very specific for a purpose, I think, and it's because if you get too specific, you start eliminating things. It keeps things very open. When it says well-regulated militia, well-regulated can mean a lot of different things. So, it could just mean, you can't just be a lawless group going around taking and picking and choosing how they want to govern themselves. It could be also regulating the guns, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. And that's been the challenge of Second Amendment supporters versus non-Second Amendments. We're always trying to regulate or fact check the fact checkers, the people who say AR-15s are assault rifles, things that aren't necessarily true when someone makes an accusation. So and then also to bring up the point that when you look at, you're right that there's two different viewpoints when you look at the president and Beto O'Rourke. Here's the difference. Beto O'Rourke is actively pursuing regulation. Trump is reacting to a situation where he said, you know what, I'm going to make a decision because as you stated, Johnny, and you're right, it should be, a well-regulated militia. So he has the freedom based on that to say, okay, we got to stop the bump stops. But it's not something that Trump is actively pursuing. And that's why conservatives still champion Trump, because he's not actively pursuing taking away your weapons, but the liberal side is.
I got doing it. So can I talk about, so like this is one of your posts, Eric, right? This is kind of the one I'm referring to.
Oh, well, let's talk about the Holocaust before you do that. Okay, so the Holocaust was a spin-off war within World War II. So World War II was from 1939 to 1945. The Holocaust was from 1941 to 1945. So when the Holocaust was ended after Hitler was taken over, that kind of ended World War II. But it was, you know, a 4-year journey where 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust from 41 to 45. Just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
All right. But so like your post literally is a share. And again, for me, my thought-provoking posts are of my own ilk. So like when I post about absentee ballots being mailed and absentee voting, I created a post on my own. I'm not sharing a meme or something, but this share of yours, the person who their name is written in what I can say is Mandarin, which blows my mind too. With I don't know the share.
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. You want me to answer that one?
No. But I'm trying to address these things. So it says the liberal playbook. The liberal playbook. So already, even in what they're posting, they're saying, I'm going to attack all of your biases. I'm going to touch it. So it says they banned guns. They got rid of God. They banned church services. They burned Bibles and books in the streets. They tore down statues. They burned the flag. They got rid of any and all history that they did not agree with. They got rid of public police, so only the rich could afford it. They go through all, like, this is everything that you're posting. And you're saying it's thought-provoking. I don't want to crap on your parade. It's had 3 shares and 1 comment and 4 likes. So
well,
I don't want to
posted it. I literally just posted that like last night.
Football. I literally could post about Michigan football, which has nothing to do with people's inner being. It's just their bias. I could post about Michigan, Ohio State right here, right now. And before we get done with this conversation, I could have 100 likes. That's because
that's not a controversial thing. It's sports typically gets more popularity in terms of memes and things just because there's no controversy there. There's no, some people are actually afraid.
Michigan Ohio State argument? What?
Well, it's not. It's more of a lighthearted discussion, right? This is it's just what it is, man.
Right. But this was posted. But what I'm saying, Eric, is when we're talking about the media bias, like the little engine that could, like, and I don't, you all probably can't see this, but it's confusing to me that this is the name of the person we post.
Can I get to that? Can I get to that, my friend? Can I explain? Can I explain that?
Yeah. Who is this person?
Yeah.
I would like to follow this person.
Yeah, no problem. So so she is a fellow. I don't know her name. She is a fellow. She's a fellow. Hold on.
No, I'm serious. This is like when I'm talking to a student.
You gotta give me a chance to respond. So basically, she is someone that has been very active in my conservative posts or discussions. She's a real person that I've read her posts. I've seen her conversations. She's in a conservative singles group looking for a man. She's a human being. That the beauty of being a conservative is it can go as far as China. It can go to Japan. I have conservative friends all over the world. So we share things. We're constantly talking. And if we feel conviction, sometimes we share things that others post. That's all that we.
This is a bot. Or it's a dude in his basement.
It's not.
Eric, it's Facebook in 2020. This human has 1 profile picture.
Well, that's because you're not friends with them, Bernie.
It doesn't even give me Eric, everything about the show Catfish is built around this. Like, it is a bot.
Vernon, there are a lot of people that I can be friends with or not friends with, and I don't see their because they have Facebook restrictions. You don't see the things that I see. You can't because you're not friends with them.
Hold on. I can see all of this person's posts.
You
That's
can't,
first
because
off.
they might, a lot of times there are restrictions of who, are you friends with this person?
Eric,
No, I'm just asking you. I'm just asking you straight up.
No,
Let me
I'm
be
not.
clear.
I
Okay.
can see all
I
of
didn't
this
think you
person.
were, because if you were friends with them, you would realize that you can put restrictions on who can see your posts. And what happens is when you friend
I'm looking
somebody,
at her
you know what
posts.
happens? Magically, all of those posts that you're talking about that you don't see because you think they're a bot, they appear.
No, Eric, you're taking me wrong. I'm going through the bot playlist. First off, this person, I can see every post, and I'm talking about every day of post. I'm looking at this person's post. I see comments in this person's post. I can see their comments in their post. And all I see is them putting one comment such as done. This is the like playbook of a bot, Eric. I'm sorry.
I'm just telling you that
you don't even know this person's name, but you're calling them your friend. You don't even know their name.
Well, their name is written in Mandarin. I don't know their name because I don't know how to read Mandarin.
So you
but
say
I
you
talk to them and I have
discussions
conversations with them.
Right. You say you have discussions with
Yeah.
this person. That's what
And I
you're saying.
read their posts.
Hey, so what is your name? You didn't do that.
No, because a lot of times I don't need to know your name when I understand your value system and your name is written in Mandarin. I don't have a reason to ask what your name is. I said, boy, this person really has conservative value systems that I do, and they're consistent and based on precedence. Remember that word we talked about before? Their history tells me that they're not a bot.
But no, Eric, their post or this person's page has a globe, meaning that their entire page is public. Like on Facebook, their page has a globe, which means it's public. That's no longer private. There's no restrictions. That means that this person, as I'm looking at it, if I were to add this person as a friend, which I'm not because then I'm going to have a bot and a virus in my Facebook, but literally this person and how they're delivering this information that you shared is so far uncredible. All they post are memes that attack a bias. I'm serious. And this is what I'm saying. And this is going back to our original point. It's not about, and earlier I said in difficult discussions, we should speak from places of two things, education and experience. So when I'm talking to
in fact,
someone that's not African American, they can educate themselves on African American history, so many things, but they can't experience certain things unless it is tied to being with an African American during a certain experience. But
wait, say that again. Hold on, say that again.
So like, if you're not African American, you can't speak from the experience of being African American.
Totally. While I agree with that, it doesn't mean you can't speak on it. So like, you're right. I totally agree with you. You can't say, as a fellow African American, right. I'm with you. I experience what you experience, and you're a white person. No, you can't do that, right. And you shouldn't. But you can say that racism is wrong. You can say things that, African Americans are disenfranchised, or you can say African Americans are treated differently than others. You can say those things, so you can speak on it. So I think we're in agreement there. But I think as far as I'm not disagreeing with you. Yeah.
You can speak on things from two places: experience and education. What you're talking about is the educational piece of it. But what I'm saying is, when we're talking about gathering information for us to derive and to construct thought-provoking and supported arguments, that's how this conversation starts. I need to, and I have a good friend that talked about this. When you find me the conservative that believes in pro-choice, when you find me the liberal that believes wholeheartedly in Second Amendment, when you find me, like, when you find people that actually are moderate in their beliefs. And a lot of conservatives try to distance themselves from Donald Trump and say, well, I'm a fiscal conservative. You hear that term often. I'm a fiscal conservative. Somebody talk about taxes, that's what's going to get my vote. But when we're talking about how we scope and derive information, this is simple math to me. It's deductive reasoning. I have to have support from different ends. This person whose name is written in Mandarin, I just think that there's hell of irony right there. A conservative post, I really believe this is a satirical bot.
But Vernon, you're going down a rabbit hole, because when I have a friend that I've had discussions with, and they talk conservative, you know somebody by their fruits. You know them based on what comes out of their mouth. So usually, as the Bible says, what starts in the heart eventually proceeds out the mouth. So in other words, people aren't just going to go around talking about how much they love Trump when they don't love Trump. It just doesn't make sense. So that's how I was basing the post, sharing the post. These are conservative friends who I don't have to necessarily know your name when I know we have the same value system. Okay, it's especially if I've studied your ability to discern things specifically. You nail it. Very complex ideas that a liberal could never come to, and you do it easily, and it's in discussion. So that's and then your post also, the post I agree with. So and let's just say this person was a bot. If I identify with the post, it doesn't matter, because the post itself. Hold up. The post itself is what matters. I don't even really care. I don't care if Satan's name was down there. If he says the truth is what speaks. So let me ask you a question, Vernon. Where do you base your value system? Where does your value system come from?
I mean, well, if you really break it down, like I'm a Christian. I have accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. I believe in this element of reading the Bible, where it's this thing called the New Testament. And in that New Testament, there was one commandment, and it was to love thy neighbor as Christ loved the church. I kind of took that so literally. So I don't believe that God is creating something for America only. I don't believe that. I don't subscribe to this lie that liberals are getting rid of the church. I don't believe that. I don't believe that burning a physical book is taking God out of anything if you're a Christian. I don't believe that. I don't believe that brick and mortar is the church. I don't believe that. So my value system is based upon what I have read and what I have experienced in my Christian faith. My political value system is loosely aligned to that, meaning I will vote in my people with my same self-interest. So first off, I'm an educator. I used to be a union member. So I'm going to vote with people that believe and support public education and believe and support unions. I'm going to vote with people with my best self-interest involved. I don't make $400,000, so taxing someone that makes $400,000 has zero impact on me. But I believe in programs to help all Americans, such as Social Security, such as welfare, such as Medicaid. I believe in all of those things to help thy neighbor. But I also live that in my Christian beliefs, because this isn't my money. So our family, when we get a couple extra pennies in our pocket, like my wife, she donated thousands of meals to Americans, because that is what our Christian values say to do. So my belief system isn't that the government is some big bully. Part of that is also because I work for the government. I am a public employee. Public funds pays my salary. So the government isn't just some bad guys in Washington in an office building, because I know that police officers are the government. County sheriffs are the government. Educators are the government. I believe in government because I work for government.
Oh, I believe
You
in
know what I'm
government
saying?
too.
So like those
I,
are
be-
like my belief systems.
I
I
believe in the
think you're referring
government.
to your moral compass too, more so than your personal beliefs, Eric. Like
Yeah.
everyone has their own moral compass that kind of leads them in the decisions they make.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So like, but so like the things that like I mean, whatever you post, that's your social media perspective and your social media practices. I don't do the social media the same way as you. That's fine. I also post the shoes I'm wearing every day. You don't. Like those are social media practices.
Right.
But when we, like you're saying, a conversation about Michigan and Ohio State, that's lighthearted. When we are talking about people's livelihoods, how government operates, things like that, I believe that with an educated discussion comes more responsibility to speak from a level of being educated. I've never shied away from talking to a conservative. It's been great on difficult discussions, and we've been begging for a different perspective just because I want to learn something too. And I want to believe. Now, I will say when the belief comes, and it's not that I'm shooting down an idea of if it's conservative, it's not true. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if it comes in a meme, let's at least get some form of additional context to have a real discussion. Like I'm forget that I call Mandarin name a bot. When I'm seeing consistent, this is just from watching kids learn about media bias and influence of social media. When I'm watching or looking at her page and I'm seeing tie-ins to Nazi Germany broken down historically. Like if I'm going down her timeline, it is current picture, Nazi Germany. Current picture, Nazi Germany. Current picture, Nazi Germany. Now, this is the person that is talking about historical elements, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't they
Yeah.
post about the genocide of indigenous people in America? That would be a good tie-in to their argument about taking over land and people. Why don't they talk about the transatlantic slave trade? Why aren't those the things that they tie into their memes? The reason why they're not tying those things into their memes, they're taking down statues. That was one part of that Nazi post, taking down statues. Not one conservative batted an eyelash when a statue of Saddam Hussein comes down in Iraq. So why don't you tie those things? And that's even closer history to talking about countries where things go down. How about when the Berlin Wall fell?
Well, why don't you post about that? I mean, you seem to be more concerned about other people's posts. I mean, I'm always
I want to have a
fascinated.
dialogue about what people post. Like you said,
And that's
thought-provoking.
I really don't have an issue with you having an issue with mine. I'm just wondering.
I didn't have an issue with it. I just want to dissect it.
Well, you had an issue with me because you said, you had an issue with it because you said I didn't put context. And then you said the source.
A dialogue about it. I want to go through.
Okay.
But no, what I'm saying is, if I make a statement, I'm being serious, and we can call it lighthearted. But if I got friends out here watching, we can really break this down. I could say that Michigan football is the best football program throughout college football history.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a bunch of numbers into that argument. And then somebody from Ohio State is going to bring some numbers into it. And somebody from Alabama is going to bring some numbers into it. And we're going to have a discussion. If I were to post a meme that talked about Michigan football being the greatest, somebody can provide a counterpoint to that. That doesn't, even if it's outside of my meme, they're not infringing upon my ability to post and what I'm posting, but they want to bring some context to what I'm posting. So if I say Michigan has 11 national titles, somebody's going to turn around and say Michigan has only had one national title since the Korean War. And they would be right, because I wouldn't be putting that context into me writing they have 11 national titles intentionally. I'm intentionally omitting the extra contact or context. That's what the purpose of the discussion is. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I think you froze.
Well, Vernon. So here's the thing. Sometimes I post things and I put a little, I might put something that shows that I'm affirmative with my support of the post, and then sometimes I don't. And it probably speaks to my conviction on how much I trust the source, but sometimes it's just thought provoking. So like I said, sometimes, so when I don't put anything up, this is just to explain to you why, because this is as a friend. The average person that were to come along, yeah, I'd be like, okay, I post what I want, I'm not going to explain to you. But to you, it's a fair question. Why sometimes not
You're
post
breaking up, Eric.
with context, and why sometimes I do. I just kind of choose when I decide to, maybe based on what is being stated. It just all depends on that. So it's nothing. And I'm learning. If some people, I think someone else on my post made a comment, what are you trying to say? And I say, you know what? I'm willing to learn. Maybe I'll provide a little more context in some of my posts than what I normally do. I'm not opposed to learning. I think that's what we're here for.
Now,
Right. No.
let me throw one thing in real quick, and I'm also doing this again just in case my mic doesn't want to die or something like that.
Right.
I want to touch back a couple steps where you talked about the response you were getting to your posts, the likes, the shares, and things of that nature, and how that was a barometer of it being thought-provoking. However, I want to ask the question, though, in terms of the context of your post, if you are posting something where the context is heavily limited to skew a reaction that is specific to one side, and then all of these people share it, like it, and distribute it without any checks or balances, isn't that dangerous? Because you are putting out information that, yes, can be considered true. Like saying, yes, Michigan has 11 championships. That is true. However, like you said, you're not adding the context to put it into the scope of whatever the conversation may be. I'm making a statement to support my belief system, and I'm utilizing a nugget of information that I can spread across the conversation. So if I'm making a statement with a meme, I didn't create the meme, I'm sharing it, and that information within the meme is diluted. You can't necessarily say it's not true, but at the same time, it's not within the proper context of the conversation or point you're trying to make. And then all of these people share it, all of these people like it, and they believe it, and there's no one there to check on that and speak up and say, well, hey, well, what about this level of context? I just feel like that's dangerous. And that's kind of the reason why this show started, because people were posting memes and everyone's just liking it and sharing it. And I'm like, and I read it and I'm like, well, that doesn't really jive. And then I have to comment. And then when I comment, I'm called the villain. I'm called a troll and things of that nature. And I'm like, I'm just providing perspective on what you're saying, because I assume in posting something on social media, the goal was to have a conversation. So I understand where you're coming from in terms of, you want to post something that may be considered thought-provoking or something like that. But at the same time, you still have to take accountability for what you are sharing as the person distributing it to your fan base and your friends, if you recognize that the information may not be objective. Because that's really the problem we're having with social media. The information that's being put out there is not objective. It's literally, I have a belief, I'm going to utilize what information I can to support my belief, regardless of the overall context of the situation. I looked outside yesterday and the sky was purple. The sky was purple for 45 minutes. I can post a meme saying that the sky is always purple, but that is not true. And I do have context within my meme because it did happen. I have a picture of it. But the point of my meme isn't necessarily true based on the overall information. So when you put that stuff out there, because it supports your belief system and you're not necessarily concerned of the source of where it came from because it confirms your belief system, isn't that dangerous?
Here's why that and with all due respect, it's irrelevant because you have to look at facts. I can look at that meme in 2 seconds, or I can look at a meme in 2 seconds and pretty much confirm what is stated based on the spirit of it. Now, will it always be 100% accurate, or will I always get it right? No. But for the most part, my memes are, I share my memes based on things that I believe to actually be very true. And that's why I rarely get a post where someone is able to challenge it and say, you were 100% wrong. And then I have to take it down. But I have done that. I've done it where I actually posted something incorrectly. Someone fact checked me, and I'm thankful for that. That's the beauty of sharing things, and then not necessarily, even if I were to say the affirmative of something, I'm thankful that people come along and fact check. Like I told Vernon, I have no problem with him fact checking it because that is the point of discussion. That's why I want to have the discussion. Sometimes I share things and I don't always get it right. That's what makes Facebook interesting. For me, that's what makes Facebook compelling. So the due diligence is on me, but it's also on the individual to do research to say, hey, you know what? That's not necessarily accurate. Check this out. And then I'll say, well, thank you. And that's kind of what. And
see retraction though, because like you put it out, and let's say 25 people shared it. Those 25 people have already absorbed it, and now their friends are seeing it. But by the time that other person gets there to fact check, and maybe you do take it down, it's already been out there. So like, doesn't that add that extra level of responsibility before posting a meme, especially if you're sharing something from someone else, to do that due diligence beforehand, just to make sure that the information that you're providing to your friends and fan base is on the up and up. You know what I'm saying? Because like I can come in and see your post. I might not have seen it when you posted it. You could have posted it yesterday and I just saw it. And then provide that extra context that makes people think and say, well, maybe this isn't where we want to go, and you take it down. But now it's been up for 24 hours and it's been out there. So it's almost like, you know, being in a restaurant and I'm serving, you know, chicken that hasn't been cooked all the way. And I serve it to 25 people. And then the 26th person says, hey, man, this chicken isn't done. Oh, my bad. And then I pull it off the counter, but it's already been out there to 25 people. So you still, for lack of a better term, done damage, you know, and
you're
that's
right.
where I'm like,
No, you're right.
I kind of agree with Vernon in terms of when I post statements like that, you know, I post memes, but they're typically just, you know, like comedy, you know, not necessarily think about like actual hard issues. When I post hard issues, I post them from me. Like I will type something, my own thought, my own expression, so that if someone wants to have a dialogue, they can have it directly with me because I am the generator of whatever's being posted. So to share a meme, I feel like a lot of people aren't taking that same level of dedication to what they're saying. Because if I am typing something and it's my words, I have to think about what I'm typing because I'm responsible for every letter that's in that post. Whereas when people post memes, there seems to be a disconnect of accountability because they didn't create it, so that when the information is found to be less than, you know, auspicious or something like that, you know, it's like, well, I didn't make it, you know, and I appreciate you double checking it, but it's like, it's already been put out there, you know, and I'm not trying to attack you in any way. I'm just saying in terms of the way memes are being used today in terms of information. It's not just communication, it's the information side of it where they create these memes, skew them heavily, and do a lot of spin, put them out there, and then we have to come through and do the work to show why that necessarily shouldn't be information that's distributed. See what I'm saying?
Hey, So for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So have you ever shared something's a belief system that you had since you were a kid and found out at 35, oh wow, that I was completely wrong. And I wish someone hadn't told me that misinformation, or I wish I hadn't learned that. I mean, honestly, have you?
Wait, before you answer, let me just throw something in there, y'all, real quick.
Yeah.
Facts are undisputed. What is disputable is how they're framed in your views. That's what's debatable and up to subject to interpretation. When memes are created, though, there is some foundational truth that spurred that meme. But how that fact is relayed, it could be debatable. It's kind of like when you are in court and you have the prosecutor and defense and y'all have the same set of facts, but you're arguing it differently and presenting it differently to the jury to determine which way it should go. So I just want to throw that in there. And also, Johnny Ken asked a really good question, and I think both Eric and Vernon should ask about comparing Nazi America to Germany 2020. So just want to throw that in there.
Okay. Yes, about 8 months ago, I posted on Kobe, who I think it may still be watching, about the mask thing, because at the time they had said, like, wearing a mask if you're not sick isn't necessarily a good idea because you're just keeping, the moisture within yourself, and it's really more for people who are sick. And I posted it because I'm like, okay, this is coming from the news, this is coming from a doctor, I agree. And here we are now, months later, where they're like, no, everyone should wear a mask. And it was funny because someone commented on Kobe's post about it that is now like 8 months old and attacked me. Like, I can't believe you're putting out this information. And I'm like, you do realize that this was at the time 6 months ago when I posted this. I did not post it today, and it took them a minute to realize, like, I had to repost the picture of my post and circle the date. It said like 35 weeks ago. I'm like, this is not relevant information. This is based on the information that was available at the time. So I understand where you're coming from with that. Yes, we all grow, we change, and our perspectives can change and things of that nature. However, that is done at the time. At the time I posted that thing, that is what I believed, and I believed it to be true. However, when it comes to the meme aspect, it's just posted. So it's not even necessarily a validation of your beliefs. You're taking that little bit of the truth that's in the meme, but not looking at the overall scope of what's being presented in the meme. That's what I'm saying. It's like you are posting that real time without doing that level of reflection, as opposed to the reflection that may come over time. So it's not like I'm saying, I posted this meme and now 4 months later, I understand that maybe it's off base. It's like, what research was done before it was posted to come to that determination? That's the thing. It's like, you see a meme, you like it, you share it. It's like, you don't see the meme, process the meme, verify the meme, and then share it. It's like you see it and click share. So that's the disconnect. Now, I know Vernon had something he wanted to say, so I'll let Vernon make a statement real quick, and then we can get to that question from Ken.
Well, and this is where, like, I do like these conversations. We're not talking about things separately. We do understand, I think all of us, that narrative framing is one thing. And narrative framing happens on both ends. The difference is what we take as facts and how that narrative is framed. And I hate to always go back to like a sports metaphor, but it's like not as controversial. Jim Harbaugh is 0-6 versus Ohio State. So ESPN, to frame this narrative of Harbaugh not being successful, is always going to throw out that record and always going to throw out the record in bowl games. And right now it's so slanted that even with success, that narrative is always going to confirm whatever they want, or the way they throw that stat out, which is a fact, is always going to confirm whatever narrative they're trying to put out there. But they don't have to put out they don't have to put out the narrative of he has a winning record versus every other team he's coached against. Like, that would be equally as valuable, but it doesn't give the narrative that he can't beat rivals. He can't win the big games. And those are the things that when we're looking at things, we have to understand the difference between narrative framing, which is, as Stacey pointed out, it's still fact. It's just how we consume it. And then look at what is erroneous information. I don't prescribed to, whether you call it thought-provoking or not, adding erroneous information to the world. And that's what's happening with some of the court battles since the election. If you look at the Senate hearing for Michigan, it's not comical, but the same thing that you saw people try to express on Facebook as potential facts, that turned around, and when it went into a Senate hearing, that is looked at as, okay, this is not fact. Thank you for giving me this. This is not fact. And their questions are, all right, do you have this information? Do you have this information? It is completely different.
Okay. What was that question, Ken? Let's tackle that.
Okay, so Ken said, so do you believe Nazi Germany compares to 2020 American issues? Eric, you go first.
Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So do you believe that Nazi Germany, meaning everything that happened in Nazi Germany during the 1941 through 45 Holocaust, compares to 2020 American issues that we're experiencing today?
Absolutely. I think it kind of speaks to the spirit of the meme that I shared that Vernon brought up. When you look at the guns, when you look at the fact that when the guns were taken away so that the guns can, that the right to bear arms, a well-regulated militia, and the right to bear arms should not be infringed upon. I think that when you hear politicians openly and actively talk about that they want to take away guns, it is the same spirit of the Nazi Socialist Party's desire to take away the guns, knowing that if you can't fight back, it's pretty easy to take over. So yes, if you look at, for example, socialism, the Nazi Party stood for the National Socialist Party. Well, the agenda was socialism. That was what captured the hearts of people to allow for socialism to take root in Germany at that time. So yes, socialism is very prominent in the liberal platform and agenda. I just watched Bill de Blasio openly say he is actively pursuing distribution of wealth. That means, in my viewpoint, socialism. AOC, Quartet, I can't remember her full name, but she proposed the Green New Deal, which will tax us at levels that will redistribute wealth so that we no longer have the middle class that we've had for years to keep at least honest Americans who are kind of in the middle with the ability, the more power you have is really kind of according to your paycheck, and people's willingness to take that or ability to take that from you creates that supposed redistribution of wealth. That's another thing. The aspect of God. One of the things that the Nazis did was, yes, they promoted socialism, which is precipitated by Marxism, which is precipitated by a godless view of society. So that agenda has to be important as well in order for people to adopt socialism in the first place. So those are just several things that I've noticed as the similarities between Nazi Germany's agenda and the agenda of the leftist agenda today.
Okay. I'll tell you guys what socialism is right quick, just to give more context to what Eric is saying. So socialism is defined as a political and economic theory of social organization, which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. So basically, there shouldn't be like a 1% wealthy elite that controls, or it shouldn't be a major wealth gap of disparity, and it shouldn't be an issue of classism where if you're middle class or lower class, you don't get the same rights or privileges as the wealthy elite. Just to give you a synopsis.
Thank Vernon, your take?
First, the Nazi Party, in order to get more Germans on their side, used the Bible, used Christianity specifically, in order to get more support for their party and to oppose Jewish people. So that makes absolutely no sense to talk about the absence of God when Christianity specifically was used in order to do those things. So no, it is 100% false about Bibles being burned as an influence to get Germans and to remove God from Germany during the rise of the Nazi Party. That's just false. That's just mean. That's just trying to draw a comparison to not being able to go to church for a public health risk during a pandemic, and trying to draw a comparison to a bad group of people throughout history. So that's first off. If you want to talk about removing God, you would have a better leg to stand on if you talked about removing religion and removing culture from Africans in order to bring them over to America. That would have more bearing if you talked about the indigenous people and removing their religious culture and experience. You would have more to stand on if you make the argument of taking God and religion away from the United States. Those are two more concrete actual events that tie into America where we could talk about that. But no, you want to remove Americans being bad people from the discussion in certain acts and put it on Nazis because they're an easy red herring throughout history. I mean, that is simple, but to scope that wrong is just used as propaganda in and of itself. To answer Ken's questions, I believe that there are similarities throughout history. One thing, going back to this book
Hey,
that I
Vernon,
always
real quick,
reference.
you were just supposed to answer Ken's question.
No, that's cool, but
Not
I just
rebuttal
wanted to.
not rebuttal my answer.
I know, but this is discussion. But I'm going to tie it in because you were supposed to answer Ken's question and then you went on leftist agenda and all that. But
No, I was just answering his question.
I got you. So if we're talking about the elements of similarities in ideology, I believe that there are some, but I could draw that same comparison throughout history and throughout different facets. So the fact that it is a government and a leader and you want to draw comparisons, you could. So if I'm looking at what I read in they thought they were free and how Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power, I could talk about how the spread of propaganda is the same, how fear-mongering is the same, kind of going back to what I talked about earlier. How if you look at the Republican National Convention, they're going to take away your guns, you're not going to be protected, you're going to, they don't believe in this country, they want to take your money, they want to make you poor. Those are things that were put out to white Germans as what Jewish people were doing. So if I wanted to draw the comparison to the narratives that come from the president, currently the 45th president, Donald Trump, and the things that he is doing that tie into his speak about Democrats compared to what Hitler did for Christian Germans compared to Jewish Germans at the time, I could draw those comparisons. But honestly, no, the government is not going to take everyone's gun. I believe that that's a boogeyman that Second Amendment enthusiasts are worried about. I understand more when I talk to Johnny about certain regulations that he does not believe in, as opposed to.
Have you listened to Beto O'Rourke?
All guns. Yeah, we've had, like, me and Johnny had that discussion.
Well, I want to have it. I'm just curious. I want to know what.
Yeah,
Oh, you know we could do it again because Johnny
do.
wanted to go back to it anyway.
But
It's like we've almost gone 2 hours, which is usually our cap. So if we want to cover the Second Amendment, I will have you on this show and we can do that.
no,
But let's go ahead and finish your thought, Vernon.
Hey, but really quick, hold on. you rebuttal mine and then you answer King's question. So I want to rebuttal since I only got a chance to answer King's
He's
question.
still answering.
So let me just rebuttal. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Sorry.
Finish.
Well, no.
Thank you.
So like my concluding point to the comparisons of now to Nazi Germany, I think that the attack on the 10th Amendment right now is way bigger in a comparison to Nazi Germany than a potential attack on the Second Amendment. But I respect both. So if I'm going to give energy to how the 10th Amendment is currently being attacked, I have to equally give support to any attacks on the Second Amendment if I'm such a thumper for the Constitution. But right now, I think the 10th Amendment is being attacked through forms of medium, especially from Donald Trump's Twitter. And just like that happened in his town hall, I don't understand when someone would say they repost something, they share something, they like something on Twitter as if they're just some regular Joe Schmo and not understand their influence. But I that's another place, Ken, where I don't think that we are aligned with the German or with what happened in Germany, because that was intentional hate. I just think that a lot of this is incompetence and willingness to be incompetent.
Okay, go ahead.
So really quick before you respond, Eric, I just want to make a note that communism is often, I just want to share this with the audience, is often confused with socialism. So like when you were mentioning Marxism, communism actually branches off from Marxism. So communism is more about advocating class war, keeping people in different classes and leading to a society where like everything's publicly owned and you have to work for it according to your abilities and your skills. So a lot of people confuse the two or try to combine the two. Just want to note that.
And
That's mine.
You're breaking up, Eric. I don't know if it's your Wi-Fi, but we're.
what's going on? Can you hear me now?
You're frozen, Eric. I don't know if you're trying to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. So
Yep.
Marxism is an ideology started by Karl Marx, and it is an ideology that precedes socialism. Socialism is a process that precedes communism, and then communism leads to totalitarianism. So that's how I've, when I've researched the three philosophies or Marxism, it's basically a path towards an eventuality. So that's how they're, sometimes, yes, you might be talking about socialism and then you may be thinking that it'll lead to communism, and maybe the discussion was initially about communism. You mentioned socialism. So I understand what you're saying. But generally, there's a stepping stone and they're all related in terms of
13th Amendment stops
the
communism.
eventuality of it. So either of them, in my view, would be bad because it just depends on what step you are and how close you are to the eventuality. But to respond to Vernon about the reason why Nazis use the Bible is the same way that Democrats use the Bible today. There's the dichotomy that you have. In other words, you use one aspect of the Bible to titillate the hearts and the ears, but at the same time, it's coupled with a nefarious agenda. This is well documented through history that this has been done, and it speaks to, I don't know if you're familiar with the story in the New Testament where Paul is a follower or a disciple of Jesus Christ, and he's preaching, and then there's this little girl that is next to him, and she's saying, this is a follower of Jesus Christ. He's a follower of Jesus Christ. And then she also starts stating things that aren't true, along with her saying that she's a follower of Jesus Christ. So at first, Paul was okay with her following him as he was preaching, because she would say he's a follower of Jesus Christ. But then she started stating things that were untrue, and he realized that she was possessed with the demon. So he cast the demon out, because then she stopped saying the falsehoods. So in other words, the story goes is that a lot of times leaders use and exploit the Bible, and then they also are actually manufacturing a removal of God's values. This is what we call a form of godliness. In other words, it looks like God, it's in some aspects, but that's so that it's what we call a sheep. That's called what we call a sheep in wolf's clothing. So you have to understand that difference. And that's what Nazi Germany was doing at that time. However, here's the hypocritical point. They were murdering Jews. So obviously they were promoting the Bible, but they were also promoting something extremely evil. They were dehumanizing people and justifying it. And then they were allowing for people to say, yeah, the Jews are horrible people. And they dehumanized them to the point of them, the Holocaust.
That's the same thing with slavery, though. The Bible
Totally
used
agree.
to justify slavery.
Totally
So it goes back to framing. The framing.
Hey, I'm 100% agreement with you, Stacey. That happened during slavery as well.
Right.
And guess which group justified the Bible for slavery? Democrats.
Right. That's because, well, let's drop this history real quick. That's because historically Democrats used to be the conservative party, and then there was a switch when we went into
There was no switch. There was no switch.
It was a switch. Listen,
well documented. It wasn't a switch.
You can go back and read it too, Eric. I'm not making this up.
I've read it.
So
I studied it. See, and hey, Stacey, this is the point that I was making when I originally made the point. There is one side and another side, and you have to use discernment. And I'm not, look, at the end of the day, that's why I share memes. That's why I share memes and allow you to draw your own conclusion. I can't force Vernon. I can't force Johnny. I can't force Stacey. I can't force any listener to make a decision. God gives us the choice to make our own decisions. Draw your own conclusions. I'm not here to twist anyone's arm. I'm here to tell you that you're right in that there is a perception that there was a switch, but my view and based on my research, there's not.
So I got a question, because you're so researed. When
did Democrats become liberal?
Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Hold up. I'm because Stacey made the original. Stacey made the original point. So what was your second? What did you just say, Stacey?
I just said, when did Democrats become the liberal party then? Because Democrats are known as the liberal party, whereas back in the 1800s and the late 1700s, they were considered to be the conservative. They're not the conservative anymore. So some switch happened somewhere, and we have to read the history about it.
Okay. So
I got a question.
Can I answer Stacey's question?
Vern is dying to say go, Vern.
Okay. So I'm with you. And again, Eric, I love that you bring up the Bible and the tie-in. I believe in Christ, and I 100%, and I've already said it, don't believe that Jesus was not an American. That's not up for debate. So it is about people in this world. So when we talk about Christian behaviors and using the Bible pretty much as a weapon, so when I see someone walk to a church to get a picture with a Bible, but there are men with guns and armored in order to clear this path for him to walk to church, but this same person has been married 3 times, cheated on wife number 1 with wife number 2, cheated on wife number 2 with wife number 3, cheated on wife number 3 with a porn star and paid off that porn star. Please don't tell me about Democrats or anybody. That's not political party. That is a bad Christian, if it is one. And we all have sin. Hold on.
There's no bad Christian.
Don't give me there's one key point. We all have sin.
Thank you.
I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finish this. But no. Don't hold on. No,
Don't
it's not
don't
funny because I'm a Christian.
don't take
Because-
the
hold on. You're still talking.
Let him get it out. Let him get it out.
You're still talking. That is, I understood your comeback because I've already heard it before. But then I go to my Bible about Christian behaviors, and we talk about we should do all things without gossip. We should do all things without arguing. We should do all things. So even in his tweets today, there is no repentance for any of his sins. So please don't give me that he has repented for cheating on every wife and cheating on wives with porn stars and paying people off. Please don't tell me that he has repented for his sins when today's tweets are defamatory, they are unchristian, and they are not of the believer value. So please don't do that to yourself if you're a believer. So you would be asking him to repent every day for non-Christian behaviors, and you have yet to see him actually repent. Hold on,
Vernon, have you been in the room with him to repent? I mean, what?
You haven't either. You haven't either. So don't give evidence of something you don't have.
I mean, I'm just saying.
You have
I
zero.
gotta fact check the fact checker, man.
I have more evidence of what I'm saying than you have. You have no evidence of him repenting. You have
The
no
Bible,
evidence of
the
it.
Bible is you and I's evidence that for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And
Okay, so don't
take-
say
hold up.
Democrats are
Take-
godless.
don't
You-
take the log out of your eye before you look at the toothpick in mine. And that's in the Bible too. In other words, we can't
But don't use him as,
sit here
don't use
comparing
Republicans as
our
Christians.
sins. We're
Don't
all
use Republicans
sinners.
as Christians and Democrats are. That's all I'm saying.
I never
That is-
said
first
that.
off, that's
I
unchristian behavior from
never
you.
said that.
That
What I
you
said
just did.
was
You just
I
started
didn't
with saying Democrats.
didn't say that. What I said, Vernon, was very specific to what you said, and I said that Democrats use
Okay, take
the
Democrats and
Bible
Republicans
and
out of
then
the Christian
do certain
conversation.
things
Because you'll
just
lose that.
like the Nazi Party did. So I said that that's nothing new under the sun. I
Okay, so
wouldn't say
also add
that.
Republicans
I would agree with you. I would agree with you that certain conservatives do that. They
No,
will
I
say
named one. I named
the
Donald Trump.
difference.
Not
The
some.
difference.
I named Donald Trump. I'm specific.
Yeah,
You
and
said
I'm
Democrats.
telling you that you can't compare you can't talk about Trump like you don't have sins. I have sins. If I talk about Trump and his 3 wives, then I have to talk about the times that I've sinned, I've lied, I've cheated, I've looked
Can
at
you
a
talk about your wife
pornography
like that?
picture. I got sins on me that I got to account for too. So we all
So
sin,
my
man.
daughter's playing with me.
Hey, we all sin, man.
I did not dispute that, but you said specifically Democrats, and you tied parables of the Bible.
I was talking
The
about the
Democrat
platform. I was talking about the
I got you.
platform.
Well,
And here's the direct link that this may be a whole nother discussion, and that's fine. But the direct link is that I said the Nazis pushed the Bible, but they also killed Jews. The Democrats today may push the Bible, certain values, and they do. There are certain values in the platform that aligns with biblical values in the Democratic Party's platform. However, they couple it with abortion, which is a huge issue. And it was the reason why I wanted to go back to what Stacey was saying is because if you look at the dehumanization of human beings, the parallels are there. The Nazi Party dehumanized Jews in order to justify killing them. Today, we are dehumanizing babies
immigrants
and justifying killing them. It's the same. And when
said
Stacey
immigrants,
brought that
right?
up, she was exactly right. They dehumanized slaves
Immigrants?
to justify slaving and killing them.
Dehumanize people, not American citizens.
I'm not
Dehumanize-
dehumanizing immigrants.
hold on, my fault. I couldn't hear that.
I'm
So
not
you're talking about-
dehumanizing immigrants. Never have, never will.
Dehumanizing people that are not nationally born here. Dehumanizing Muslims.
I don't dehumanize any of them. The
I didn't say
issue,
you.
you're bringing up a whole new issue. We can go down that road too. I just don't want to keep going down too far off of the points.
Okay,
So
but
you want
my
to start
point
talking
was
about
that-
immigration? You want to talk about, that's a whole nother subject. I'm glad
But what I'm
to
saying
talk
is
about it.
that, but if we're tying in politics and Christianity,
Ooh,
there
that's
is
another
no
conversation.
immigrant
We gotta
of
do that
being a
one.
Christian.
Yeah, that's
We got to do that one later. That's
Hold on.
another
There
conversation.
is no immigration in Christianity.
Mhm.
That's not
if we're
true.
gonna have the immigration discussion, we are not equally having
There
the
is
political
immigration in Christianity.
that
There's no
does
problem
not
with
exist.
being able to
So
be
that's what I'm
and
saying.
have their being, but it has to be laws. Laws state that you have to effectively live here for 7 years and follow our immigration process. And as long as you
I'm
follow the
with
laws
you.
on the books, then I think we love immigration, especially Christian and conservative.
I'm sorry,
Now-
my 3-year-old is hitting my TV.
All right. So I think this would be a good transition to start our closing arguments given the time. So I want to start with you, Eric, as our newest guest. I want to get your closing thoughts on everything we've discussed
And continued guess, Eric.
that I'd like to cover, but obviously we would need a fresh episode to do those things. So take this time to speak to our viewers and Vernon about your closing overall arguments.
Who's first? I'm sorry, Johnny. I think it broke up.
I would like you to give your closing argument.
Okay.
You know, closing thoughts, not really.
Okay. Thank you. First off, I just want to say this. You know, I appreciate this, Johnny. I appreciate this platform. I think it's very interesting. It is challenging. It is difficult discussions. I appreciate that I'm amongst friends. I know sometimes you can be in areas and it gets out of hand, and that wasn't the case. I wasn't sure coming into this, but you know, it's what you pretty much, the picture you initially painted is what it ended up being. So I appreciate that, and again, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Vernon, closing thoughts.
Hey, always fun. Always fun, always good discussion. And I think just tying in to what the initial kind of discussion was about media bias, narrative framing, all those things. I think the key to these discussions are also getting some verbiage, some dialogue about certain other elements to it. And I'll always say this every week, there is a responsibility of when you express something that you support something. And if we really want to lead to constructive conversations and move into facets where we acknowledge our own bias and accept other people's opinions, we got to start having these discussions. We got to continue these discussions, and hiding them in circles where we get a whole bunch of pats on the back, that doesn't move the meter of us being civil.
And I do appreciate your extra special guest, Vernon. Stacy, is there anything you would like to add?
I just want to wrap everything up that we talked about today regarding bias, media framing, because it's important in a world where everything is social media relied on right now, and how memes are a phenomenon partly because of our attention span, where we read something real short that grabs our attention versus reading something that has more detailed explanations behind it. But how the phenomenon of memes has also perpetuated the division that we see in our country right now, and why it's important to be we call it academic integrity, but it can be integrity across the board, where you literally look at the background, the credibility of the memes you're sharing, because they can be more detrimental than good. So I think that's kind of like a foundational component of it. But today was an excellent conversation. I look forward to some more conversations we'll have, learning from each other, and basically healing our implicit biases, because we can help each other with our blind spots.
Okay. I appreciate that. And you know, and another thing in conjunction with memes that I see a lot on social media is people will post an article, a news article, and not actually read the article. Mm-hmm. They see the headline of the article.
Exactly. They just read the title.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Everyone just reads the headline and no one actually reads the story. Like, you know, there was a funny one last week. I think I posted it in the group about a Democrat who was accused of some election related antics. But if you actually read the article, it's from 2018. You know, so you don't see that in the headline. So immediately people latch onto, there it is. There's our confirmation of the fraud, but you didn't actually disseminate any of the information. And that's another thing that a lot of people do to push basically their narrative by pushing these headlines that aren't used in any context whatsoever. But we've covered some interesting stuff here today, and a lot of it is leading to future conversations. So I hope, Eric, based on your experience today, that you would be willing to come back and cover some other topics. I would love to have you, and I'm sure Vernon would love to continue the conversation with you. Or if we have other guests who may want to as well,
Over
absolutely.
30
So,
years there.
I do appreciate
Amen,
everybody
amen.
sticking around. This was a little bit longer episode than normal, but it was great. And we didn't really have any technical issues too much this time. So we're getting there. We're making progress. So if Saturdays work better for
That's
you,
right.
we can do that. But like I said, normally we broadcast on Thursdays, but I am fluid in the air date if I can accommodate guests. So thanks again for watching, everyone. Thank you, my guest, for coming on today this morning. It was fantastic as always. We will see you next time. Have a good day.
Have a good one.
Take it easy.